the Conflict of Interest Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2023 be now considered. And remember that the Majority Leader moved it in an amended form. So, Ndindi Nyoro, are you here on budget? No contributors? Yes. Wangare? Wangare wants to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to support the Majority Leader on this bill. And Mr. Speaker, I think the most saddening thing with the amendments done by the Senate is that it takes us very far back in the war of corruption. Mr. Speaker, the issues we have been dealing with for the last 1 month or so, generated by Kenyans, by Gen Zs, by civil society, Mr. Speaker, most of them could be sorted if we dealt with corruption. Because, Mr. Speaker, every year we have had issues of pilferages of money, both at the national level and at the county level. So, Mr. Speaker, anything that would jeopardize that fight should be rejected, and we should actually support this bill and the way we had passed it, Mr. Speaker. And we shall reject the amendments of the Senate and go with what we had passed as the National Assembly, because they called us sitting, the Senate called us sitting, and I'm avoiding to dwell into casting aspersions to the Senate, but I think the Senate has lost the track of what they should be doing. Because, Mr. Speaker, one of the biggest issues we have is that we have so much money going to the counties, but we don't see the value of it. We don't see governors being held accountable. In other words, Mr. Speaker, what we have seen is the Senate being obsessed. And I say that because I've been a former senator, Mr. Speaker, that they forget their major and main mandate of protecting the counties, Mr. Speaker. What we have seen is that we have should actually be calling the governors and the CECs from the counties to show accountability, because the mandate of oversight of government in the national level is vested in this House, Mr. Speaker. We must actually, Mr. Speaker, have the conversation of whether a CS should appear before the Senate or it should be a governor and the CECs, Mr. Speaker, because we have now our CSs giving excuses that they are not able to come to this National Assembly because either in the morning they were in the Senate or in the afternoon they were in the Senate. It has become a matter of duplication, Mr. Speaker, and we should be able to deal with it at some point. But on this bill, Mr. Speaker, even the President, as he made this address that he made earlier, Mr. Speaker, he alluded to this issue, because if we do not deal with matter governance, with matter corruption, then we'll have done nothing, Mr. Speaker. So I hope that we'll do justice, and the members that will be chosen under Article 113 on mediation can be able to do justice to this bill, so that we can be able to properly deal with corruption. Because you cannot say you're taking from this hand and the right hand is hidden behind, Mr. Speaker. So I actually support the Majority Leader, and that we should reject the amendments done by the Senate and this bill to proceed as it was, Mr. Speaker, so that we are able to deal properly with the issues that have been raised for the last few weeks. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Oundo.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. When we enacted the new constitution under Chapter 6, we were very careful. We knew absolute power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And that's why Chapter 6 of Integrity and Leadership was inserted in the Constitution. We proceeded to prepare an Act of Parliament that made a mockery of Chapter 6. We proceeded to have various anti-corruption laws that do not seem to be biting, because outside the Honorable Speaker, many Kenyans believe it's the elected leaders, it's the political class that the purveyors of corruption in this country. Honorable Speaker, we as Parliament, and that includes National Assembly and Senate, if we can water down the bill that we passed here to make it practically impossible to hold accountable elected leaders, then, Honorable Speaker, we are taking this country into abyss. And that's why I support, as moved by the Majority Leader, that what Senate did was a great disservice for this country. And Honorable Speaker, I think Senate is suffering from inferiority complex. Senate thinks that members of parliament here, National Assembly, have got so much money that they're wallowing in a lot of money. And that's why they go to the pettiness to come and see how many cars are in the parking slot of the National Assembly. How many new cars or how many new tires members of parliament have bought. They have this misconception, even those who have been here, Honorable Speaker, that members of parliament use CDF to fund their personal lifestyle. Honorable Speaker, we cannot afford to allow conflict of interest not to be called out. Honorable Speaker, where we are in a position of influence. So if we allow ourselves to also start doing business with our own entity, it means therefore, Honorable Speaker, no other Kenyan will ever get a contract, will ever get any job in this country unless you know somebody. We must win ourselves this mentality that you must know somebody for you to get employed, that you must be connected to you for get a tender, that you must bribe for you to be paid for any work you have done anywhere. Honorable Speaker, I want to urge those who will be appointed to go to mediation committee. I want to urge, because at times have been some of them, senators can bully ordinary members to accept their way. Here we go with the irreducible minimum. The irreducible minimum is the bill that we passed in this House. Any other story, Honorable Speaker, we will expose them and surrender them to Gen Z to deal with them accordingly. Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the motion by the majority leader.
Member for Gishugu. Give him the mic.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. I support the motion as moved by the leader of my majority. And Honorable Speaker, the principle of conflict of interest has been there for many, many years. And it has been loosely been used under the tenets of natural justice. And this issue has been left by the courts to determine whether there is conflict of interest or not. But now here comes a law that is very explicit to explain matters of conflict of interest. And this House, Mr. Speaker, will not allow Senate to stand on the way of Kenyans in fight of corruption, because that is what they want us to, they want to take us back to. And we have to stand as a House and support the government, which is now committed towards fighting corruption. And the executive, through the president, has already pronounced itself that this is a government that is willing to fight corruption. And therefore, Senate should not come on the way of the will of the Kenyans to fight corruption. And that is why, Mr. Speaker, without belaboring the points, I support the motion as moved and will reject in totality the proposals that have been made by the Senate. Thank you, Honorable Speaker.
KJ.
Mr. Speaker, I do stand up to support the report as presented and amended by the Leader of Majority, and also to object to the changes that have been put in by the Senate. Honorable Speaker, right from the onset, I'd like to say that this bill in itself was a great opportunity for this House to start addressing some of the matters that are being conversed, even by the young people who are calling themselves Gen Zs. The issue of conflict of interest in the management of affairs of government is a thorn in the flesh to this country. So, Mr. Speaker, where this House was seeking to remedy some of these maladies, it looks like Senate is keen on taking us back to a place where we are not able to counter the issue of conflict of interest. And for that reason, Mr. Speaker, I do object. Mr. Speaker, the issues that are being canvassed in the country today are calling us to order. It is at a point like this when we ought to ask ourselves as a republic, issues of conflict of interest aside, even the constitution of this country, Mr. Speaker, is now ready for an audit. This constitution has been with us for a good 15 years. It is at this point that we should ask ourselves, how has this constitution served us in the last 15 years? And when we audit the constitution, we shall put Senate on the spot. We shall ask ourselves, in its composition as it is right now, Mr. Speaker, is the Senate serving Kenya right? And to my mind, there are some amendments in the Constitution that would occasion for us to relook at how Senate is constituted. As it is, Mr. Speaker, Senate is required to be attending to the matters of counties, Mr. Speaker. And even as the Gen Zs are calling out the rot in the national government, we know that there are even bigger problems in the counties, Mr. Speaker. And if Senate was true to its roles, Senate would have already gone into these county governments and checked on the rot that is happening in the executives of counties, Mr. Speaker. The rot and the conflict of interest that is happening in the business that is being conducted in counties. So, Mr. Speaker, I do object vehemently, and I say that even as we are looking at these matters of conflict of interest, it is the right time that this country had a conversation with itself on how the Constitution has served us for the last 15 years. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I do believe that if we look at how Senate is composed, we as a country might decide to borrow a leaf from jurisdictions like that of the UK, where the House of Commons has its job laid out for itself. But the House of Senate in the UK, Mr. Speaker, and you would be one to tell us, is a house that is reserved for very esteemed people and citizens, Mr. Speaker. That if we were to recompose our Senate, we might decide that we shall reserve the Senate for those Kenyans who have served so diligently in very specific areas, and they would be the people that we would be nominating to Senate, so that it is a proper nyumba la wazee, which advises the country on very topical and very technical issues from a point of information. As it is right now, the Senate does find itself at times with no business to prosecute other than to meddle with the work that is being done by the National Assembly. And as such, they use their time to do what we have seen this afternoon. So, Mr. Speaker, I object the amendments made by Senate, and I do support the report as presented and as amended and presented by the Leader of Majority. I do support, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Those who are on the screen, like Ndindi Nyoro, Johanna Ngeno, John Gitonga, you are all for appropriations. Now the mover should be called upon to reply. Majority Leader, you may now reply.
Thank you, Honorable Speaker. And let me thank the few members who have contributed and commit that we will, upon rejection of the amendments from the Senate, and I want to beg that members do vote to reject, we will immediately constitute a mediation committee to be able to consider this bill and amendments afresh. I therefore beg to reply.
Order, members, take your seats. Members on their feet, Sabina Chege, take your seat. Order, Sabina Chege, take a seat. Wamshomba, take your seat. Pasaris, take your seat. Honorable members, I now put the question, and those who vote yes will be supporting the amendments from the Senate, and those who vote no will be rejecting. I now put the question, which is that the Senate amendments to the Conflict of Interest Bill, National Assembly Bill number 12 of 2023 be now considered. As members of that opinion say aye. As members of the contrary opinion say nay. Nay. The nays have it. Go back to order number 9.
Order number 9, motion, consideration of the first supplementary estimates for the financial year 2024-2025 general debate.
Honorable Ndindi Nyoro, you are the mover, right? Okay. Johanna Ngeno. You are not ready. John Gitonga.
Thank you, Speaker.
Are you